Hi, I'm Gary Strigler, and this video is going to be on what I consider to be a really fun project, and it's also, though, a really practical, useful project, and that's building a library ladder. Now, over my career, we have built library ladders in closets, in pantries, in libraries, lots of different places, and as ceiling heights have gotten taller, it just kind of makes sense to be able to have great access to the upper part, safely great access without hauling a ladder in. And we've even had some piece of furniture like bookcases, furniture that had a library ladder attached to. Now, for the last several years, I've been using hardware from CSH, Custom Service Hardware, for my library ladders, and they can put together basically a kit. Now, they'll also sell you the ladder already made, but what's the fun in that? I'd much rather build the ladder myself, and you can save some money too. Most of the ladders that I make out of maple. You could also probably make them out of oak or something. I don't know that I'd make them out of poplar or something like that, because you want a really stable wood to do that. So, couple general things. I don't even know for sure, but it's probably about 40 board foot of lumber, and it's 4/4 lumber, 3/4 inch thick lumber. I buy mine what's called S3S, where it's been surfaced on each side somewhat and has one straight edge. And then I like to do that so that I can plane it and take it down to the thickness I want, and also straighten the edge. So when you get your lumber, the first thing you want to do is you want to look at all your boards and pick out the two straightest boards to make the sides of the ladder, because it's really important that they are straight. The sides of the ladder are 3.5 inches finished wide. In other words, this dimension's 3.5, but what I do is I start out ripping it probably about 3 3/4, just in case. Probably all ripped a board, and it kind of got a little bit crookeder as you ripped it, so you can go back, take it to a joiner or something, and straighten out. There's also jigs you can use on a table saw if you don't have a joiner to create a straight edge. But anyway, once I have got it, close to size and really straight, then I'll run it through either a joiner or planer to clean both edges, get the saw curve soft, and then the interesting part starts. So first of all, to determine the length of your ladder, and this is the instructions. They have some general instructions, but I think also they have instructions that actually tell you how to build a ladder, because I built several. I didn't go bother to dig those up, but what I did know, how do you determine the length of the ladder? Basically, you have to know what height the mounting rail is going to be at, and don't forget to order your rail when you order all your, your hardware. Basically consists of the mounting brackets, the rail. You're probably going to have some splice kits for that rail, and if you're going to be able to see the end of the rail, in other words, it doesn't go wall to wall, then they have some little termination caps. But then you need rollers, a bottom roller, and they have those in ones that just roll. They also have braking ones where when you step on them, it puts the brakes on, which to me that seems like the best. But then the top rollers, there's a couple options on those too. They have an option where if you want to, say in this instance, we're putting this into a pantry, and we've got two different places where we want to put the ladder, but instead of building two ladders, we got the type of rollers where you can just pick them up and move them over and hook them. But they also have ones that it's a captive roller where once you put it on, you can't lift it up, and you have to plan ahead for that as you're installing your rail. The other thing they do sell, you'll want to get a top rung unless you want to turn one yourself. The kits also come with, I thought I had one right here, a metal rod with finials for each side. Oh, here we go, I'm sorry. It's going to be a lot clearer. A metal rod with finials for each side. These go into the wood, And this is how I determine this. This kit's for a 16-inch ladder, and I pretty much have always just built 16-inch wide ladders. I think you can get them maybe in 2 foot, but this tells me 16. How wide I need to cut the little treads, and we'll cover that later. But anyway, and they also come with some other screws in the package too, which are color matching. Basically, it's a pocket screw that color matches. More about that later. Okay, so we know about you measure to the rail, the height of the rail, and in this instance, in my pantry I built, it's a break between 2 cabinets, and that's where the rail's going to go. Add 7 inches to that for the overall length of your ladder. And again, you might want, if you've never done one before, you might want to go ahead and find their complete instructions on how to build a ladder. All right. The biggest thing is laying out the ladder. And you have to make sure you have a left and a right hand piece. It can, I've done a bunch of them, it still can be confusing. So up to the first step, I made about 10 inches from the bottom up to the first step, and you want to start out by making this cut on the end. This is 10 degrees. Okay? So each one of these is at 10 degrees also. And once you've done that, I just used this piece of wood, and that basically marks the top of each one of these dados. So if I lined it up right there, it'd go the top of the dado to the top of the dado. So the actual distance, in between the treads is this minus 3/4, but from the top of tread to top of treads, right at 10 inches. I think it's maybe 10/8. You can probably go to 10 if you want to. But anyway, this is a simple way to lay it out. I like to be pretty simple, but make sure if you use a piece like this to lay it out, that you do include that extra 3/4 of an inch, so that you're going from basically from the bottom, from the top of one mortise to the top of the other one. Okay, now, once we've got them laid out, make sure that you've got a pair going in opposite directions. And I made little indexing marks. Now, how did I make this dado? By the way, this dado is about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch deep. You don't want to get much more than that, but it needs to be deep enough. It might be 3/16 deep enough so that it has some strength, although the pocket screws that come in from the outside are going to really hold it together well. So, and you have to make 2 of these jigs. It's a little bit, it can be kind of confusing, but I made a jig. Matter of fact, I'm probably going to be confused right now. The jig fits, yeah, there we go. Wait, that's not it. There it is. All right, I hope you can see that. Maybe I can turn it up. But this jig is designed, I'm going to grab a router here real quick. And then this is very similar to the jig that I use for making plows when I build cabinets. So the edge of the router rides against this fence, and it gives a flush cut to this edge. So to make one of these dados, all I have to do is take my jig, put it right over that layout that I made using the piece of plywood. Very important. Clamp it right there, and of course I would be sloppy on that. So super important that this edge piece is tight against the edge of the ladder, and this is clamped in place, and then I'm just going to make the pass with the router. I actually need to make one more of these on the other end, so let's move down here. And because the way that this jig goes together, it's let's see, now I've got to grab the other jig, and it's probably going to be just as confusing for me to find it. There we go. I need kind of to have a space, an open space over here to reach in with that clamp. So again, this edge is going against the edge of the ladder, and I'm putting this right on that layout mark. And this is kind of an important thing too. I don't know if you can see or not, but when I did the layout, I put an X on the side that I wanted to put this, the dado. You know, here's the layout mark, but I need to know which side of that layout mark the dado goes on. And you know, you still have to kind of stay focused because you can ruin a ladder real quick. As a matter of fact, I have a sample ladder side in my shop, which made it really easy for me to start building these because I made a mistake on it. So, you know, anyway, just pay attention, put that mark on there, and you should be fine. I was pretty upset when I made that mistake on that particular ladder, but now I've got a sample that's always in my shop that I can refer back to, so I guess it wasn't quite as bad a thing as I thought. All right, got that really solid. This is just a 3/4 inch straight cutting bit. Again, I just, you know, by adjusting the depth of the depth here, I got the depth of the dado I wanted. Okay. And I kind of try and take it easy at the end because I don't want it to blow out too much. I'm still going to round over the corners, but it's a good idea to take it easy at the end of the cut, or it might be time to change out that router bit too. So now I've got a pair of these. And I also want to round over the corners of all these pieces to get a soft edge. Whoops. I know I have the router here. There's a sander. We'll use this one. This is just a 1/4 inch white side router bit, 1/4 inch radius white side router bit. And yeah, I was real careful, did a test cut because I want to just round over and not drop down deep enough to be leaving a shoulder. So, and by the way, the bearing rides, I don't know if you can see this or not, but you know, the bearing rides far enough down there so I can do this after I've made those dados. Same thing from both directions, although I went ahead and rounded over this edge because I wouldn't have to worry about the router blowing anything out there. All right, just real quick. One thing that I didn't mention earlier, again, this was what we call S3S material, and it actually came to me just a little bit thicker than 13/16, so I ran all my material through a planer to clean up the faces and to get them, they're still a little bit over 3/4 inch thick, but you want these to definitely be the same thickness and be rid of anything that's rough. If you happen to buy what they call S4S lumber, which I think stands for surface 4 sides, you're going to be right at 3/4, you won't have to, you can skip that step. But I generally like to buy the S3S material if I can. All right, so there's also, if you notice, pilot holes drilled, that's for those pocket screws. They're going to come back through. So when I put a tread in here, like so, during final assembly, this pocket screw will drive through into the end of the tread, and that's what will hold the ladder together. I will need to drill probably a pilot hole back in since this is maple, because the worst thing that can happen is to break off one of these screws. And by the way, they color match. I don't even know if this is antique, it's not antique bronze, whatever color this is, but there's a whole lot of different colors available on these also. I'm gonna put this back over so I don't lose it. So getting the layout for those pilot holes plus this hole, and that hole is a 3/8 hole. And it is so that when I drop that rod through, see, it goes through like that. Again, if I only had 4 more hands, you know, these treads go in like that. The whole thing screwed, you know, the screws go together. Anyway, we're going to get to that in a minute, but I wanted to show you why I was drilling that hole. I made a couple of little jigs, and I've done it before where I did this on a drill press, and a drill press can be a good way to do it if you get the edge set up just right. But my little jig was actually pretty simple, and I've got 2 holes more down here that I could use that jig for. Let me grab the jigs now. Just like with that jig for plowing for the treads, you got to make a left and a right. Let's see which way I got here. I think that's good deal. I got the right one. I took a little bitty thin piece of 3/4 inch wood and made it to where it'll just fit in. So I can show you here. There we go. So this little strip is guiding it on the edge. This is locating it in the groove. And as long as I've got to push this one out, I guess it would be possible. This would be really bad, okay? Don't do that. So as long as that's pushed over in place, I'm gonna I've got a drill bit for the pilot hole and also one with this 3/8 bit. Now, I like to use a Forstner bit, makes the cleanest cut that I think you can get to drill this hole. This is just a plain steel bit, and it's, you know, it's got a size where that pocket screw is going to be able to get a bite, but it gives some relief where I don't, again, the worst thing I can do is twist off on those pocket screws. Anyway, I've got that dropped in there. Make sure that you don't care whether you put holes in your workbench or not. I guess if you're really concerned about your workbench, you might throw a piece of scrap wood on top of it. And then I just take this and I'm just drilling down far enough to locate that hole. By the way, that hole is centered, because you'll need to know this to make your jig. This hole is these holes are about 1 inch from the edge, and of course centered this way. This hole is centered up and down, and the center of it's a 1/2 inch from the bottom of that. You know, I've never tried to get it so tight that it fits up underneath and supports the tread. I just don't think you're going to ever be able to get it really that tight. And if you've got a problem with a piece of maple this big bowing in between 2 pieces, you probably have got too big a person on the ladder. Anyway, but the reason that I just start this, as all these chips come up, if I was still drilling through this, they'd clog up. So I basically just use that to locate. Now, I don't want this to blow out on the back side, so I'm trying to be careful. So one of the things I found, I'm going to drill a little bit slow when I get ready to come in. I'm going to make sure I keep this pushed down so that it's you know, the bench on the other side will help keep it from blowing out. that's through. Yep, okay, so now I've got that hole. Let's do it one more time on the other one. Got that locked in. Whoops, forgot to do my pilot hole. One thing I want to mention too, you wouldn't think this could happen, but one time I got lined out and I got confused. I was drilling this hole for that rod on top of the stair tread. So make sure when you get your jig laid out, think about it, make sure you're putting that below it, or else you too will end up one of those sample pieces you can keep in your shop to know what not to do next time. All right, now I'm going to go ahead and take, because I've got some rough edges and stuff. I'm going to take a belt sander and run up and down here real quick on both sides, clean everything up, and then we'll actually probably touch it up with a random orbit sander, except the belt sander is unplugged. I think this belt sander's probably got like 100 grit paper in it, but it is some paper that's kind of worn a little bit, so it's not super aggressive. When you're using a belt sander, it can be your best friend or your worst enemy. For one thing, you don't want to get in too big a hurry. And the other thing is, you got to just relax and let the sander do the work. If you get to pushing that at all, you're going to end up with a big old dig. If you've never used one before, you might even want to get just a test board and practice on it before you start on the side of your ladder. Or, you could sand it with a random orbit sander, just take you a little bit longer. Worst thing that can happen to you when you're using a belt sander is a cord catches on something, or you step on the cord and then it digs. So you want to watch out for that. Just as an aside also, if you're super concerned about this blowing out on the other side, maybe you had some wood that tend to do that, instead of this hole in the jig, you could make just a small hole, drill that all the way through, and then take your big bit, drill part way through from one side, flip it over and drill from the other side, and then you wouldn't have to worry about blowing out. But because I'm doing it in the bench, I've had some pretty good luck, and also it's a great idea to have a fairly new bit. All right. Put this out of the way. Well, it probably wouldn't seem, oh, by the way, I just keep all these things, these two jigs, my jigs for plowing, I'm all just stacked in the shelf in my shop so I know right where they're at. So the second time you build one of these, it'll go a lot faster than the first because you'll already have all your jigs. All right, but there's got to be some Arkansas math somewhere in this video. So here it is. We want the outside of our ladder to be 16 inches So I'm going to take and put these two pieces back to back, and we're looking to be 16 inches. So I'm going to hold 16 inches on this side and read what it says on the other side, which is about 14 13/16. I set up, stop on the saw. Well, first thing, these need to be exactly 3/4. So I did run them through a planer to get them exactly the thickness I needed. Then I said stop on the saw, cross cut them to length, and then I rounded over the edges. And the last thing I did was clip the corners, because if I clip those corners before I round over the edges, it's really hard to keep that bearing on the router from going around the corner. Also, I don't know if you can see this or not, but I just got a little pencil mark right here on my saw, so that when I bring, well, I think I'd better make sure, I'm going to make sure I follow all the steps I've been talking about. Here's the piece cut to length. I'm going to real quickly round over all 4 corners with this router. So as I was doing that, it came to mind that that last one of these I sanded, I didn't hit with a random orbit sander, so I'm going to make a mental note. I'm going to come back and do that. But here's the piece that's rounded over now, rounded over all the way around, nice and smooth. And all I want to do is clip maybe a little more than 1/4 of an inch off. So I've just got this pencil mark on my saw. I'm just going to lay this here like so, move that right over to that pencil mark. Flip it over. The reason that we're clipping those corners is, we don't want to have like a sharp corner sticking out past these boards. We want this to be a little bit wider, more comfortable to step on, but we don't want to have a sharp corner sticking out. And by the way, if you've ever watched a video I was talking about something like I'm clipping the corners of a piece of plywood, same trick. All right, real quickly, I believe this is one I just need to run a random orbit sander up and down this. I'm also going to random orbit this one really quick, because if you don't get the sanding done, you get the ladder together, it gets a whole lot harder to do the sanding.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed part 1 of the assembly of this ladder. We've made the sides, we've made the treads, and next week we're going to put it all together. Join us next week as we complete the project.